And start.
So in the past couple months, there's been a lot of mass shootings that happen, and one in particular is the El Paso shooting that happened on August 3rd. The shooter, in his manifesto, talked about Call of Duty and how the video games are basically training people to become murderers. And when he said that, the media just went crazy, and they started wondering if video games are causing mass shootings and if it's causing violence in youth. So that leads me to my topic of video games relating to mass shootings and video games relating to violence. And first, I'll talk about them not relating to the shootings. And there's actually no evidence that supports video games causing the mass shootings. And to quote James Ivory, professor at Virginia Tech, when it comes to actual serious criminal violence, there's virtually no evidence that video games matter. And in the court case Brown versus Entertainment Merchant Association, the court, the vote went 7-2 in favor of the people that video games, like, there isn't any real neurological evidence that it's causing them to become trained killers, basically. And now I will talk about video games that are relating to the mass shootings. And the El Paso shooter, and not only him, the Sandy Hook shooter, referenced video games in their manifestos. And 2 days after the El Paso shooting, Donald Trump had a presidential conference. And to quote him, "We must stop the glorification of violence in our society. This includes the gruesome and grisly video games that are now commonplace." So he's basically saying that the video games are the cause of this. Yep. Now I will talk about video games relating to violence and anger in young people. And then video games can increase the aggressive thoughts, behaviors, feelings in both the short-term and long-term brain. And to quote the National Center for Health Research, the longer the individuals are exposed to violence in video games, the more likely they are to have aggressive behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. Mm-hmm. Yep. Now I will talk about the other side of the argument. Studies have been done, and it isn't the violence that makes the people angry, it's the competitiveness and the difficulty that makes people angry. So like an example is that, like, if you're playing Madden with your little brother and you're losing, you're gonna get angry, and it's not because of any violence in the video game, it's just because you don't want to lose. And to quote the Competence in Pending Electronic Games and Players' Aggressive Feelings, Thoughts, Behavior Study by Andrew Przybylski, who is a professor, experimental psychologist, and director of research at Oxford University. In each of the studies, it was the level of difficulty, not the presence of violence, which predicted aggressive thoughts and actions afterwards. And in 2018, $17 billion worth of video games were sold, but there was only 800,000 crimes in youth, which is a lot less than 10 years ago, even though the sales of video games were just as high back then. So there isn't really a correlation that it's actually causing any violence. And so in conclusion, today I talked about video games relating to mass shootings and the video game violence in youth people. So, are there any questions?